Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Kathy Mazak, and I have a very special guest today, one of our recent grads from our Navigate pilot 12-week session that just wrapped up last week. So, Megan, would you introduce yourself to the podcast listeners?
Sure. My name is Megan Evans, and I'm currently a postdoc at the Department of Psychiatry at Yale. My research focuses on the social determinants of mental health, substance use, and recovery, and ways in which people with lived experience of those conditions can help aid in other people's recovery.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will say, Megan, that when we kind of talk about the Navigate program, a lot of times we talk about like it's for professors, but sometimes we have postdocs, researchers, adjuncts, like who are also professors, but like you can use the word professor for a lot of things. So I want to know, like, as a postdoc in your position right now, like what attracted you to Navigate, like right now in your career, like what were you kind of looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I found your podcast actually as a PhD student, and I'm like, I'm maybe like the traditional, non-traditional student, right? Like I'm older, I have a child, and I see all around me the culture of overwork and overwhelm. And I know that I love parts of academia and I love parts of what I do. And I also don't want my career to look like that. I don't want to work every night. I don't want to work every weekend. I want to take vacations. And so I thought especially as a postdoc, like it's a time for me to try out academia, right? And see what it is I want to do for the next step. So I'm like kind of coming at it as like, if I can make this life sustainable for me, then I'm happy to join academia. And if I can't, then maybe this isn't the right path for me. So that was my thinking.
And how did Navigate kind of influence your thinking? Not that you have to tell us that you've made some kind of grand decision, or anything, but like, what are some of the things that happen inside the program that now you're kind of taking into consideration?
Yeah, there's a couple things that happened. One is I learned, or I'm learning, I guess I should say, to trust myself more and trust what I know about myself and how I work. Because when you're junior, and I'm sure even when you advance, like a lot of people have a lot of opinions about what you should do and how fast you should work. And of course, like the default answer is always sooner and more, right?
Right. Yes.
Nobody's ever like, slow down, take your time, think things through. And so one of the main things I decided during the program, which feels like a big success to me, is I decided to hold off on submitting a K award that I have been working on from the June deadline to the October deadline. And that might seem like counterintuitive as like a success story, but I really think that I'm going to have something that I'm very happy with by October to submit. And if that means my career takes, a little bit longer and I have to do a little bit more creative financing of, my salary, that's one thing. But I feel like I made a decision that was best for me and also best for the research, because I think that I wanted, like, a K is a 5-year award, right? I want to do something that I'm invested in and not something that I've thrown together at the last minute to meet an external idea of someone else who's like probably very well meaning, giving me advice that it would be better to submit in June.
Right.
So that was one thing that came about. And I think that really came out of some of the talks we had about boundaries and just like, you're not going to make everyone happy, right? So like if you have a choice between disappointing other people and disappointing yourself, you should disappoint other people.
Yes. Yes, I want to underline that. Can we, like, in audio, can we somehow underline that? I think that's so important and such like a big step towards self-trust, right? Is to say, like, I can disappoint other people and I will still have a career. And I will still, in fact, my career will be better because I've made decisions based on what I know I want to do and how I see, a sustainable future for myself.
Right. Right. And it also comes down to the fact that is another part of the program, which was like learning how long it takes you to do things. Like this is the
Yeah.
first time I've submitted a career development grant. So like my unrealistic expectations of how long it would take me turned out to
Yeah.
be unrealistic, but that's like to be expected when it's the first time you've ever done something, right? Like you don't know how long it's going to take. So I think there's also something that I've taken away, that there's like no point in holding ourselves to these unrealistic standards. But it's better to like learn yourself and learn how you do work so you can sustain it, rather than, rushing to meet external deadlines that are also sometimes like arbitrary and made up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then burning out, because like that again goes back to this idea that I want to create a sustainable career. I don't want to like get halfway through my career and be like, wow, I just don't like this. I'm working all the time.
Right.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And now I have
Yeah.
to try to like recover from that, right? Like
Right.
I'm
Right.
trying my best. I mean, and even like just getting a PhD is a really long process, right? And then to think like you're not going to take any breaks or not going to take any time for yourself and just push through. And it's an attitude I see a lot around me. And so I guess I'm trying to like a little bit swim against the tide.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's like the only way that that change is going to happen. And the only way to like not do that, I feel like it's like a treadmill, right? Like you're on a treadmill and it's like the treadmill is just like a couple clicks too fast. And like you kind of just want to get off, but you can't really, and you're doing it, you're not falling, but it's like, how much longer can I keep the pace? I think especially early career, right? Like you are, and then it's like this one after another of these like external milestones, right? Like you get the PhD, then you get the postdoc, then you get the K, then you get, it's like one thing after another. And if you try to do it at like some kind of outwardly imposed pace, or the pace that you perceive, or like well-meaning advisors are like, you really should submit in June, not October. The difference in the academic timeline between June and October is like nothing. Like in the world of academic pubs, for example, like it's like it's a blip, because everything we do kind of takes years and years, right? The K award is 5 years long. The time between, you got an idea to write an article, or you've collected and then you collect the data, and then you analyze the data, and then you write it, years long. So like delaying a few months is not gonna, change I will guess it'll change your career only for the better. But then also it's like you got to practice setting the pace, like you deciding what the pace is. And I think that's also like a really important part of, again, that like building self-trust and building that muscle of like, okay, so now when you have similar decisions like this, as you go through your early career stages, you already know like, oh, I did this and it turned out okay. So it gives you confidence to like make other choices that go in favor of you, instead of in favor of like what other people either are telling you or seem to be telling you, which is another thing I think that happens a lot. Like we just perceive that there's these rules and these timelines that aren't necessarily actually true. So yeah, I love that, that your kind of big takeaway was like, I didn't do this, or I delayed doing this. It's like such a great, it's so different, right? Than saying like, oh yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second. Like one of the things we talk about in the marketing for the program is like working on this almost done article. And we call it, inside the program, we call it the low-hanging fruit article. And one of the things that we added to the program in this first 12-week version was like curriculum around moving that low-hanging fruit article like out the door with the hope of submitting, at the end. So can you tell me a little bit about how you worked with your low-hanging fruit article and whether you submitted or not.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my low-hanging fruit article was one of my papers from my dissertation, and I had drafted it, and that was like before the holidays, and then I was done with it. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I knew it wasn't done, but I was done with it. And so I put it away. And then I just didn't want to come back to it, right? And so I knew it didn't need that much. And I also knew like it kind of was what it was. I couldn't go back and, add more participants or do anything more. The data was collected, the dissertation was done, and like I just needed to like figure out what was the story and move it along. And so I'm happy to say that I almost submitted it, meaning I submitted it to my co-authors, my dissertation committee, and I'm expecting comments back from them, I think next week. So I'm excited I'll have it submitted, I think this summer. And awesome. It is, so I think it's, again, a little bit of reframing success, like in that it's much closer to done now than it was when I started. And I've also like done a lot of the back stuff, like started the portal and like, wrote the cover letter and all the things. And I'm just like, but I decided I think also to honor, like, I don't like when people send me something and want responses by the next day. So I thought I would like extend that same grace to my co-authors, right? And like give them time to read and actually provide valuable feedback rather than just like deciding like I've made up this arbitrary deadline and I will meet it or like or else, right?
Yes.
So I feel I'm feeling good about that article, and I also wanted to like underscore a little bit some of the things you had talked about in the program, is that things unexpected and expected come up where like it's just like things aren't always our top priority. And so while we were in the program, I got the proofs back for my book, which is also from my dissertation. And so I really had to drop it, in the middle to focus on this timely matter that I needed to focus on. But I was happy that I was able to pick it back up and also just again work on my mindset about like I'm a person that could work on something over and over and over again. And so like it's somewhere in my mind close to perfect. And that's also kind of honestly how I was trained. I was trained with the people that really would tell me things like on time is better than perfect, but in their actions would not do that, would always ask for extensions and would always really like spend probably 80 to 90% of the effort on the last 10% of the product. And so I was happy that I was able to send it out to my co-authors without obsessing too much and really like giving people, I mean, I want their contributions, right? Like I asked them to collaborate with me for a reason. And I feel like fresh eyes can see what I can't. And so just getting it out the door and like getting it to people who can provide a fresh perspective on it was like a big success for me.
That's awesome. Congratulations too, because that is a big success. And also congratulations on your book. I mean, this is one of the things, right? Like in the program, we talk about, like you mentioned, right? Like both like predictable and unpredictable derailments. And also like the word derailment, obviously it feels like it's negative, but sometimes derailments are positive, right? Like, I mean, you got back the proofs for your book. That means your book is like so close to being out. And at the same time, it does have that effect of like, okay, wait, now I had this plan and I have to reconfigure. So I wonder like, what kind of tools from the program were helpful in helping you to like deal with that kind of very great, wonderful derailment of the book proofs coming back?
Yeah, I think it was just there's a couple, a lot of it comes back again to mindset, is like accepting that this is what it is. And I could see this as like a failure, or I could see it as like an interruption, right? And so I decided to, you know, drop what wasn't urgent. And I know we talk about important and urgent, but this thing that came through was like both important and urgent. And I
Yeah.
decided it was like more important, right? Because it's closer to done. It's closer
Yes.
to publish. It's like getting a revise and resubmit. Like people think that this is worthy of publication, right? So I should like
Yes.
put my focus there. That was one thing. And the other thing was, I think, your work around like making your writing practice sustainable and just celebrating the wins, whether they were like the wins you expected to have or the wins you actually did have,
Yeah.
really helped me to change my thought process, because for so long I've really like not celebrated because it, like you said, things do take so long. By the
Yes.
time like something is in the world, you're like, okay, like
I'm
now
over it.
I'm
Yeah.
on to like the next three things that I'm like
Yeah.
waiting on. And so I was definitely skipping that like self-congratulatory step, that
Yeah.
like, okay, I did something, I submitted something, something's in the world now, something's a step closer to done. And I was definitely starting, I think, to burn out, because every time I finished something, I like didn't celebrate it.
Yeah.
And I was always looking at what needed to be done rather than what had already been done. And the list of things that needs to be done doesn't ever really get shorter, because you just keep adding to it, right? Whereas the list of things that you have done actually does get longer.
Yes, it does amazingly and wonderfully. And almost it feels like miraculously, but it happens through your concerted effort over so much time. So yeah, it's really important to celebrate those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So just a couple more questions before we wrap up. I wonder, for our listeners, whether you could finish this sentence. I almost didn't join Navigate because. Was there anything that made you kind of stop?
Yeah, I almost didn't join Navigate because I didn't think investing in myself was worth it, or that I was worth investing in, I guess.
And what helped you to kind of get over that and join anyway?
I really decided, like I said, like I have a life outside of work and I
Yes.
want to maintain that. And I thought like I could invest this money now and see what happens, or I could look back like 3, 4, 5 years from now and like either be in the same position or be done with it, right? And be like, this
Right.
is too much, this is not for me. And I also am trying to really focus and like think of my postdoc as a time for professional development and personal development. Like it should be the time where I'm investing in myself, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right, that's what I'm
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you. And then finally, like, who would you recommend Navigate to and why?
So I would recommend Navigate to most women and non-binary folks that I know in academia, because I know we all kind of we've been socialized in the same system. We deal with a lot of similar challenges, and having a space that you're allowed to acknowledge this, and you're not just supposed to pretend that this is normal and this is
Yeah.
like just the way that it is, I think has been so helpful, to really have that space where you're allowed to acknowledge what everyone sees in front of them, and everyone knows that this is a problem, but it feels often like in our own workplaces we're not allowed to like identify this and work to change it.
Thank you so much. What a great kind of way to end this episode. Megan, thank you so much. Thank you for being part of Navigate, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.